Hi, everybody. Welcome to this session, which is around tourism and communities as part of this year's Travel Unity Summit. So hashtag is TUS 2021 if you want to be writing about this on your social medias and the like. For those who might not know us, we're a 501c3 Travel Unity focused on increasing diversity in the world of travel. We really have two major focuses of our work. On the individual side, how do we get people to see travel as a part of their lives to grow personally and professionally and as a possible career path? On the organizational side, everything goes through the filter of our DEI standards for travel and tourism. We have an alliance of different organizations that come together to speak with one another about these issues of DEI, and as the alliance continues to grow, we are seeking to provide more resources, such as our job board that is going to be coming up in the next few months. We have thus far had some really good dialogues around this concept of DEI in action. Once again, not just those platitudes, but how do we actually do stuff when it comes to DEI and making it work. I want to thank Roost. We'll be up in Lake Placid for our in-person sessions next week. I want to thank MMGY and recognize the work that we're doing together and have done together on the Vistas Latinas study. Some of you might know about the Black Traveler study that MMGY put together with different partner groups. So this is the next study on underrepresented travelers, and it's an interesting, useful study that is available through MMGY with all of the proceeds going to Travel Unity's programs. I want to recognize Thailand Tourism and Cayuga County and the rest of our folks, including Cynthia and Visit Fort Collins. Thank you for being a part of this. And with that, I will kick it over to David Holder to get things going.
Excellent. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you for all of you for attending this session today. We are very thrilled to be speaking with you and talking through some opportunities for DEI initiatives and really bringing it to life. So we've got three great panelists for part of this that represent some really incredible works, some understanding of different opportunities, applying it in different directions, trying to overcome different challenges within their community. I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves. I want to give them a chance to review their work. But I think let's start with actually meeting them and learning a little bit about their community. So Cynthia, Nerissa, and Tony, tell us who you are. Tell us what's distinctive about your community, and what do you personally bring to this conversation around DEI initiatives? Nerissa, you want to start with this?
Yeah, so my name's Nerissa Okiye, and I represent an area down in South Florida, Martin County, and we are right above the hub of South Florida. So typically when you think of Florida, you think of high rises, you think of South Beach, people think of Miami or Orlando. We're kind of in between that. We have a 4-story height restriction, really low density. So that old Florida kind of feel that you don't get with beautiful beaches, the lakes, and the temperature that we all like in the winter. So that's kind of a little bit about our community, and what makes us a little different is the location, but the fact that conservation is so important here that there's not a lot of growth. In fact, we get a lot of pro-growth, no-growth battles all the time, which are kind of interesting to observe. On a personal level, I'm mixed. So I grew up multiracial, and then I grew up in the Virgin Islands, where when you grow up in the Virgin Islands, it's 90% Black. And coming from a mixed background, I have that perspective of having come up to the mainland and having had to face racism and different issues that we just didn't have growing up. That you get on an island. And then again, on a personal level, I have two boys, one who's very fair like myself and kind of passes. People don't know what he is. Same thing with me. People don't know what I am. And then my younger one looks more like my husband. So we've had some issues surrounding racism in Georgia and here in Florida. So that really those are personal issues with me.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's go over to Tony next. Tony, would you like to introduce yourself and your community and your personal connection to DEI initiatives?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I'm very grateful to be a part of this summit and to serve on this panel with this great team. I come from Milwaukee, home of the NBA champions, Milwaukee Bucks. We're a great city on a great lake. It's the freshwater coast, some of you from the Pacific, and West Coast, East Coast, and we're the fresh coast right here. So we have a lot to be proud about. We have challenges throughout the city, and we're working on different aspects. I serve as the Visitor Experience Manager with Visit Milwaukee, the CVB, and on my civic responsibilities, I chair the city's Equal Rights Commission. I've been a long time, most of my adult life, advocate for civil and human rights, kind of tied into my personal relationships. My mother's from Spain, my dad's from the US. My first language was Spanish. Me llamo Antonio, bienvenidos a todos. And so I kind of experienced some of those issues with my mom, who received pejoratives throughout her life, and because of language, because of speaking. And I was always a mighty defender of my mother, and still am, and we enjoy speaking Spanish to each other as always. My husband is from China, and so he intersects with the LGBTQ community, and obviously as a Chinese American, he's faced a few challenges recently, obviously with API hate, and it's a passion of both of ours of service and advocacy and equity and equality. He serves on the City of Milwaukee's Board of Health and chairs the Lead Advisory Committee. So we got our hands full, but it's a part of our lives. It's a part of our families. My parents are very supportive. His family's very supportive. So we're all in this together. And that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's great. What a fantastic introduction. And I am I'm totally buying into the Fresh Coast piece. That's awesome. Let's go off the coast, and we'll go and meet Cynthia. Cynthia.
Well, hello, and like my other panelists, I'm very delighted to be here. I have to say that Ronnie had to persuade me a little bit. I feel like I am a beginner in this space, a little bit personally, as well as where our community is. We are located about an hour north of Denver. A long time ago, it's not so much anymore, but people used to think we were in Wyoming. That's another 45 minutes, but you know, they thought we were so far out there. And now we have definitely more of an urban flavor. Outdoor recreation is certainly very popular here. Beer, if anybody drinks some Fat Tire, cheers, and I'll bring you out here and we can do some more of that. I know sometimes I lure David out here to enjoy a little of that. But I would say those are things that we are known for. We're working to develop more cultural resources. We have some, we just haven't always told that story well, nor have we focused on our DEI components as much as we should. Fort Collins is also, still just evolving in that space. Our city has recently hired a director of DEI, which is fantastic news. We have Colorado State University in our community, which I think has been a driver for conversation with us. And then we recently entered that space more fully as we've started on our tourism master plan. So again, at a beginning point, I grew up on a very small, in a very small community. I'm gonna make you all gasp, graduating class of 6. So they really do have those in little tiny towns in Colorado, dotted in an agriculture area. And I laugh. My mom always said from the time I was 2, she knew I would never stay. I had different aspirations and goals, and have just been very fortunate along the way. So I come from that very small community, and that's where I focus is community, because community means a lot of different things. And how do we bring ourselves together, no matter where we start, and really tell our stories and embrace each other fully.
Awesome. All right, I'm already inspired by the 3 of you. I think we can call it a day. No, I'm just kidding. My name is David Holder. I am the CEO of Clarity of Place. Cynthia, the great segue into the thought of community. Our business model is built on how do we connect destinations more effectively to the communities they serve? How do we make certain that we're telling stories and being relevant and sharing data in ways that makes the other organizations in our communities stronger? And we do that through the work of the destination. We do that through the management and the marketing of tourism. We do that by making our communities livable destinations. So I am thrilled to be a part of this panel. We've got some great stories to tell. And I think that's one of the things we want to start with, is this whole idea of storytelling as it applies to your communities. And Tony, I'm going to come back to you and ask you to start this off. Really thinking about the idea of authenticity, how this connects to our communities, how this connects to DEI opportunities. How do we bring the stories of the people of our community into the work of the destination? Tell us some of the things you're working through on that in Milwaukee.
Well, you know, it's always a work in progress, and there are always challenges. And Cynthia, I will tell you, it's been lifelong work, but it seems like every day I see something new, and it's a learning experience. It's an opportunity to listen and to hear those voices, and then we plot our path maybe differently and look at things differently and work through them. Telling the stories, you know, it's easy to say we tell the stories. It's easy to put somebody on a cover of a magazine or a visitor guide or in front of a video or a marketing piece. But we have to be obviously authentic in what we do. First of all, you have to develop a relationship with the communities and the neighborhoods. We have 191 neighborhoods here. So we're a city of neighborhoods. But if you don't develop those relationships and they don't realize that you're authentic at what you're doing, and you're just taking a camera out there so you can take a picture for your cover story, or you want to bring a rider in and you want to stop by, but you haven't stopped by before, or you haven't stopped by often. I think that's where you start developing the real stories, is when you create those relationships. When you take your entire team and staff and visit a site, and we do that often at Visit. Anyone from an accountant on the staff to someone in marketing to someone in event experience and the CEO. We're there, we're present, and we're going to listen. That's ultimately very important. Just to tell you a quick story would be Sherman Park, which is a local neighborhood that experienced an uprising over a police shooting. So the facts are the facts. The story is the story. And it created a lot of chaos in a part of the city. And we have to admit that, and we have to tell that story as it is. But it created something even greater. There was a bank building there, a large one, 3 stories, which suffered from fire damage. So the bank turned it over to the community. The community got together, and it became a hub for those underrepresented individuals who couldn't find capital to start a business, to provide a service. And that is what we call rising from the ashes, the Sherman Phoenix right now. And that's a story we tell. And then we bring folks into Sherman Phoenix to really experience it, to experience that food making, to experience maybe a haircut and a story, or some kind of service. And a lot of those businesses have gone on, they've grown, and they've moved out into other parts of the community. So there's a real story there about a challenge that we faced in the city and how we were able to turn it around. And now it's a destination and experience for travelers. They want to go see Sherman Phoenix, and they want to visit there. So it's not our only story, and we need to continue to cultivate more of those so that we can offer these experiences to travelers. But travelers can be people from far away, or in the other neighborhood, or down the street, or from another county. So keep in mind, there are many stories to tell, and those stories exist in your city, and we have to amplify those stories in a meaningful way. And one thing we've done is create a campaign called Unique Unites. So you can go to our website and pick out those different stories and pick out those different communities and those touch points. For example, there is one that's about Harley, and there's one about Pride Fest. So you may want to think about how you can ride your Harley through the Pride Parade. You know, so there are connections and intersections, and it's a wonderful campaign that we've started. It's called Unique Unites, and it's doing a tremendous job in telling a lot of stories, and also introducing people to the local businesses there and entrepreneurs that and the individual neighborhoods.
That's great. Tony, I love the way you bring in the neighborhood aspect of this. And one of the best ideas that I've heard out there for kind of making that first step into this. I was talking with a past destination president from Buffalo. And she was saying that as soon as she took the job, she reached out to every single city council member and every single county legislature, and they all represent different areas of the county, different areas of the city. And she asked them, I want you to take me on a tour of your district and show me what you feel we have opportunities around. And all of a sudden they just started talking. They developed a relationship doing this. She continued to repeat that every time there was a new election, every time there were new officials. It got her so embedded into the neighborhoods, not just the community as a whole. And it really added that. So Tony, I think what you're doing there in Milwaukee with these neighborhood initiatives is exceptional. It's just awesome. Nerissa, from Martin County, you cover a large county, lots of different areas in your area. Lots of different destination elements. How are you bringing these stories to life? How are you reaching into the community to help them with these different stories that you have to tell, the authenticity part of it?
I think to echo what Tony said is you need to get out into the community. So when I started this position, it feels like just yesterday, but it was about 6 years ago. The CVB that had been in place before, the county had terminated the relationship and there was no tourism for over a year because they didn't think there was any return on investment. So I came in and they had moved it back under the county. So it's really good that you're part of county government, but there was a lot of uncertainty and hesitancy with the industry. Like, oh, the county just destroyed the CVB, kind of blew up tourism and yeah, now you're here. So it took a lot of going out and getting to know the stories. And I think what they hadn't done before and what we were able to do is we're very unique. So we have oceanfront resorts, 2 of those, and then we have very rural, small historic inns on agricultural areas on a lake. So it's getting out there and really talking with people to find out what makes the area so different and tell those stories. And then we've been challenged, because I was challenged, is, well, you don't do enough with like African-American history. You're not telling the Black story. I said, well, I can't just have people traipsing through neighborhoods to do stuff. So what is the product? How do we get involved with what the actual product is that a visitor can do? So it's not like Tony said, it's not staged. You don't want to just have a fam tour or an experience that you take a travel writer to. And then if I show up as just a general visitor, I'm not able to do that same experience. You lose that authenticity. So we got involved with the group and I got involved and I pulled my husband in. It's the Martin County Black Heritage Initiative and it's brand new. And so part of that is they're pulling together all of the stories and impacts and things that we've heard. Like there's all these rumors like, well, they did this over here or they did that over there. And it's really kind of weaving it together. But I'm like, all right, we need to validate this. We need to make sure that it's accurate. And then what is the experience around this? Again, we have a historic African-American cemetery. I'm not sending people traipsing through a cemetery. I'm not sending random people into church groups. Like, what is it that we can do? So I think it's really trying to make those relationships and experience it and listen to what people are saying and say, okay, one, do they even want this to be a visitor experience? Because sometimes people don't want strangers in their communities. And if they don't, then okay, well, is there another story or another aspect or another thing we can do to highlight? And then again, the value of what tourism is and the impact that it has and why they would want to be part of the tourism industry or how they are already part of the tourism industry.
Great. I love the respectful appreciation of what to do, what not to do, pulling that into the relationship building process. And I think that, you know, one of the themes that I think is going to come out from this is it's all about those relationships. It doesn't matter how they're applied. If you don't build them to start with, there's nowhere to go. So it's all about that interconnectivity of the community, creating that network of just very personalized relationships. I just think that's great. And I know, Cynthia, from your perspective in Fort Collins, that relationship building piece is so just organic to just your basic persona as a community. It's that essence of the brand promise of Fort Collins, is that interconnectivity between all of these different businesses and individuals. How are you beginning to think about how to apply this idea of DEI into those different initiatives, into that kind of concept of togetherness?
David, that's a great point. For us, we talk internally about love of place. There's a lot of communities, I think, that have pride of place, and those are fantastic things also. For us, that organic component, and sometimes we don't think about it, or we take it maybe a little for granted, but I think that we've done it in some traditional ways, and we're starting to explore, at least for what Fort Collins feels like, non-traditional. We are Colorado State University is a land grant university, so our roots are in agricultural. And it's just a very solid foundation in that way. But of course, that had some different ways that agricultural comes up, right? Hispanic workers in our community. We have Germans from Russia, and there are folks who are very passionate about their history there. And we talk about the history. We haven't always done a great job of telling the story of the people. And so now it's pulling the people into that and trying to be much more intentional, much more building those relationships. We have a video that we've just produced that we're super excited about. And we worked with a dancer, Mo, and Mo identifies as they, them. And the question that came back to us was, I don't see Visit Fort Collins really involved in this. Tell me more before I say yes. So we had to talk about our journey in the last 24 months, a little bit of pre-pandemic, and certainly some work that we were able to continue during that time. And we got to the end of that conversation and were granted a yes. So we're super excited to be able to share that very shortly. And again, we hope that story will inspire others to continue to work with us, to build those relationships. We think there's lots of uncovered treasures to find yet. And so we're just excited to keep going, but it is relationship by relationship, right? And sometimes helping them understand why we haven't been in the space and how we're trying to be very intentional as we go forward.
Cynthia, you talked about this idea of the personalities of your community and bringing the people side of the destination to life. We had the opportunity to do some work with Raleigh, North Carolina, and they have a brand that they've built called Passionate Minds, and it really dives into the maker side of that community. But if the audience wants to take a look at this, just do a Google search for Passionate Minds, Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a fantastic people-focused branding program, and it really brings the aspect of how these creative individuals come together as a community. It brings it to life. So, and I think you've got a very similar feel in Fort Collins with what you're trying to do there with this kind of personalized relationship building, Cynthia. As we start thinking about how to apply this, Cynthia, from your perspective, I'm gonna start with you. This idea of connecting locally, but obviously we're destination marketing entities. Our job is to help our community find visitors, welcome those visitors, interact with those visitors, so they create a level of sustainability within our community. Cynthia, from the Fort Collins perspective, how do you start to bridge that idea of I need to reach in locally, help to capture and curate these stories? What's the connection to pushing those stories out to build interest from the visitors?
I think for us, it did start during that destination master plan process in reaching out to groups who you would typically think we would reach out to, right? And then reaching out to some beyond that to try to be very encompassing of our city and our county. And of course, we all live in the space where no one actually cares what municipal boundaries are, right? So sometimes we need to just sneak a little further south over to our friends in Loveland or over to the west with Greeley. Again, in recognizing how all these pieces fit together. And so I think, again, that being intentional and inviting. And I think we had a few folks who were just really surprised that we asked, right? They're like, oh, you're interested in what we would think about this. Or we had a conversation with our transportation folks, and, you know, some of it relayed to workforce and how some of our folks got to and from work. And we didn't actually have bus service on Sunday. Well, guess what? They still had to work on Sunday, right? How do you get from point A to point B? So incorporating in some of those needs. And then I think it continued deeper. And so whether it be service industry, whether it be craft brewing, whatever that was, and university for us is a huge component of where we should be looking, because they do a much better job, quite frankly, than the rest of us throughout the community in working on diversity and highlighting it and honoring it and telling that story. So we're trying to come alongside them a little bit further, and then do the same thing with our city and our county folks.
Yeah, I like the idea that you apply that into this major institution. If they're backing these efforts, if they're supportive of this, it's so much easier to get others interested. You're kind of leveraging that role that Colorado State University has within your community. Tony, from a Milwaukee standpoint, have you been able to tap some of these larger scale institutions, some of the corporations in the community, your NBA championship team, to really bring this authenticity to life and help really reach into some of these different populations and make them more involved in what you're trying to accomplish as Visit Milwaukee?
Yeah, I think in the forefront when you talk about the NBA champions and the Bucks, and there's a story there within itself. It's multidimensional. Yes, they're a championship team, but they were on the front lines of the social justice movement with Black Lives Matter, marching down the street. And those were the athletes that people connect to, no matter who they are, where you're coming from, or your background. When 60-some thousand people gathered outside in the Deer District in front of the games, it was an inclusive group of people that were hand in hand and joined together for more than just a game, but a common purpose of community and coming together. So I think I always look at this. I have 3 A's in my mind, always. I look at authenticity, which is important. But when we look on that, we have to layer in accountability, and that's holding each other accountable and holding ourselves accountable. And then there's action. Without all 3, you're not going to be very successful. So you have to be authentic, you have to hold yourself accountable, and you have to show action, that you're actually working on things and moving things forward. So by the Bucks pulling folks together and that social justice movement, it really had people opening their eyes, including other corporations and looking at them and getting involved. So setting the tone is most important. And I will say from a CVB, on that end, we're setting the tone. We've had a CEO come in and set the tone right off the bat on our strategic planning through 2025 with guiding principles of honesty, integrity, unity, value, diversity, and inclusiveness. But most of all, we have 4 pillars and 4 goals in that strategic planning. And I'm so proud of this one: ensure diversity and inclusiveness in everything that we do. That's everything we look at, every budget, every curating itinerary, every meeting with media, discussions within our organization and our IDEA committee, which is inclusiveness and diversity and equity and accessibility. And our IDEA committee spans out through our partners and community organizations. So we're all there at the table having these conversations, and it's a way that we can connect. And some of our many corporate partners are there. The city is sitting in there in that IDEA committee. So when we're wanting to have discussions about things we're going to be doing in the future, let's bring it to the IDEA committee to make sure it fits and it's inclusive and it does bring our neighborhoods together. So that's the work we're doing. And it sounds great, right? But we've got a lot to do and there's a long way to go. And I heard it earlier, it's not a race, it's a marathon, and you have to be completely committed to that marathon from the beginning to the end, and there's no stopping. So I'm not saying it's everything is wonderful and it's roses, and I'm not going to paint that picture, because it's not. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of pain points, and we have to understand that and realize and hold ourselves accountable.
Tony, it sounds like you have taken the idea, no pun intended, of how to pursue this, how to bring that action component to the conversation. And we do a lot of conversations around, we have a marketing department, we have a sales department, in many cases we have a services department, but these community aspects of what we do, we've kind of layered that into everyone's job, but it almost deserves this level of focus that we have with all of these other parts. And I think it's really come to life as we've gone through the turbulent times of the last 18 months, that we need to be more dedicated to our role in the community as destination organizations. We need to apply that in the similar fashion that we apply our marketing plan, our sales plan, this community relationship plan, this, what you're doing from an idea standpoint. It's got to be a part of our future, and it has to be not just something we give lip service to. It's got to be embedded into our DNA.
Well, David, I think what's important is that we always think of that value proposition in the work we do. And you mentioned sales and you mentioned marketing. And of course, we've got to sell hotel rooms. And of course, we've got to do that work. And of course, it's got to have an economic impact. And it's got to have an economic impact for more than just one group of people or one neighborhood. But one thing that's important and that we valued is a culture change within our organization, where we can come up with ideas and propositions and projects and offer them right straight to the CEO, and not having necessarily tied to what the money income is, but what is the value of that connection with that community. Like when we were out there at our Juneteenth celebration, and we were there with coloring books for kids about tourism, because we need to be an education force. We need to be promoting tourism and travel to young kids who have to have that understanding early on. And that was so beautiful, because they were there painting a museum and then understanding that's what tourism and travel is about, and creating that pipeline of future travelers and future hospitality workers.
That's awesome. Nerissa, you're a different size destination than Milwaukee. So I'm sure you're taking a different approach with this. You've got a different structure in place for how you collect these different stories, how you bring them to life, how you put them in the hands of both your locals and your visitors. How are you doing it from your perspective? Tell us a little bit about the structure you have behind this.
So we're a team. It took 5 years, but we're a team of 3 now. So we're a really small, team when you look at it. And only 2 of us, I would say, are tourism professionals. One is an office manager. So she manages everything, keeps us in line, but wants nothing to do with any of the tourism type aspects of it. So it's really a day-by-day approach, and it's really trying to reach out and, again, take the time out of your schedule when you can, if you can, to make those relationships. And it helped. It was very difficult in the beginning when we kind of started from scratch. So we started from nothing, which, I think when everyone looks at DEI, you're not starting from nowhere, but you've got a long way to go. And sometimes it can be really overwhelming about how do we do all of this stuff. And I think it's just taking segments that you can think or relationships that you have, because we've all worked with people, and making inroads there. So we've had a lot of environmental crises here, and we've had to be involved to support the local businesses. We've had blue-green algae outbreaks. We've had, of course, you have hurricanes. So you get to know some of the business owners, because they're reaching out for help. Like when you're in an environmental crisis, which I think the whole world went through, a health crisis, everything's kind of stopped. And like, you're trying to figure out how can you help bring people into your destination. Is it the right time to bring people into your destination? Everything's kind of paused. So for us, it's just, we've made relationships with people because we've had to deal with crisis communication or other communication. And they look to us because we're within the county framework of I need to get this done, or what are the county commissioners thinking? And I was like, I don't know what any of them are thinking. I may be in the same building with them, but you don't necessarily know what they're thinking. But it's providing some insight into, okay, here's what was said at the last meeting. This is how it can benefit you as your business. And then when you need something for them, we did a really good advocacy video. And this is when Visit Florida was threatened. They were looking at taking all the funding away from Visit Florida. So we went out to community members that we'd worked with because of water quality crisis and said, we need you now to step up and tell the story of why Visit Florida is important. Why is tourism important? And they were able to see that, like, you know, the team reached out and we got these videos that we did for them, or whatever it is you've done, because we're marketing, like you said, we're marketers, we're marketing the destination. And so we are continually compiling assets and, you know, everything that goes along with it. And it's just kind of matching what we're doing to the visitors with the community and making sure that they understand it. So then when you need them, you can go in and be like, all right, well, how do we tell this story? Or how do we look at from this point of view? So I think it's just doing what everyone's doing, but on a smaller scale. Like, you have the relationships. For whatever reason, you already have the relationship, you've worked with people, and it's about communication and having open dialogue and like, all right, well, what about pivoting instead of water quality crisis? How are we looking at accessibility? Like, you run a paddleboard company. What if I have visitors that want to come that are on a wheelchair? Are they able to do this type of stuff? So it's interjecting the DEI principles, or looking at the communities that may not have been, or the stories that may not have been told, or and working with those partners to be like, okay, well, how do you address this? And okay, that works, you know, like putting it through the lens of, can anyone, again, my big thing is, can anyone come and do this, find this, experience this? And then kind of working from that point on. So I think I answered the question, but it's working with the relationships you have, and then you've helped them, they've helped you. And now you know, your principle of creating your diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, or whatever you're looking at doing, how are they taking on this, or how do they address these, any concerns, or what services do they offer that may help with accessibility, or what are they looking at doing in terms of reaching different audiences, and then working with them on that.
You know, Nerissa, I think what you have touched on is something that is so vital to advocacy, and it is the taking the time and the perspective to look at our role as a destination organization, not through what we're doing and what we're delivering, but more through how can it benefit someone else, and really taking a step back to consider it through someone else's eyes. And I think that the advocacy work that you mentioned around Visit Florida, actually, I'm gonna ask you, if you wouldn't mind, if you have a link to that video that you can share, if you could send that to Ronnie, and we'll get this distributed to the group. Tony, I'll also ask for your ideas, work, if you have some background information like that you could share with Ronnie, that would be really valuable for distributing to the group, because I think it's a great setup. But Nerissa, I love the idea of this this portion of making our organizations more relevant by connecting ourselves to these other stories, and it being able to apply that into your crisis communication efforts, I think is something that's a learning point for everyone to consider. More and more, we're talking to destinations that are living by their crisis plan, because it feels like every day we're in a new, some kind of new crisis, economic, something around the pandemic, something around weather. There's no stoppage to the crisis. That's the murder hornet scenario. But what we have the opportunity to do is, as we're doing planning, as Tony mentioned, he's working through the 5-year plan for Visit Milwaukee. If we can connect those plans and begin to make our strategic plan, our master plan, more connected to how to be resilient through a crisis, it all of a sudden allows us to be stronger deliverers of service, stronger storytellers, stronger curators for our community. It keeps us on track, even though nothing feels like it's stable on that track that we're on. So I think that's just such a profound component of what you're doing there in Martin County. Nerissa, let me stay with you for just a second. And I want to ask you a little bit about content. We've talked about collecting all of these stories. And, if we go, I've been in this industry longer than I am willing to share with this entire group. But one of the things that has stood out is how the conversations around content have changed over the years. It used to be that we were very much we were consumers of content. We needed content so we could share it with others. All of a sudden, then we became collectors of that content. We started compiling these different catalogs of it. We then became custodians of it. So now we're being asked for how can we share that content. Then we became full-fledged curators. It feels like we're moving down a path where we're moving more from a collection curating of content into straight up production of content. And many destinations have made that move. How are you managing content? How does it fit in with your storytelling in Martin County? Tell us a little bit about that whole aspect of this idea of content communication.
So for us, and it came out of the one environmental, crisis that I talked about when we had blue-green algae everywhere. And I think when John Oliver starts talking about your community, it's gone too far because, he was very funny, but you're going, oh goodness. So we have our main, Discover Martin website, which is the information that we're sharing with the visitors. But we also created a Protect Our Paradise website, which is Protect Our Paradise. And that's been split out because we wanted to be able to communicate with our residents who sometimes don't want people coming or who are very worried because the environmental crisis, while it doesn't affect a visitor, it affects a resident differently. So we wanted a place to kind of put all the residents' concerns and address that. And then that's expanded throughout the year. So now if you go to our Protect Our Paradise website, we have of course, you had the COVID information there. We had, we're the start of the Florida Reef Track, which is in peril. So it's the reef track information and how to, interact safely with the reef. It has sustainability on there. And we have industry resources now. So we have all of the industry communication, as well as if visitors are interested at all, like, can I check, how do I check the water quality or anything like that? That's all on Protect Our Paradise. So those stories and that content is a little different because it's a different audience you're working with. And then on our main page, we do, and I think a lot of destinations have done this, is you're using a lot of user-generated content, and then you can kind of create, everyone, it's always a new buzzword. Is it native content? Is it this? Is it that? But you can create that information there. So we have a stories section on our website. And so we talk about different things on the story section, and then we drive a lot of advertising traffic directly to that. So we've segmented the website out. We have, if you want to travel like a local, there's a quiz you can do, and it'll tell you what kind of persona you have. And that was a lot of water-based activity. Are you a surfer? Are you a kayaker? Are you a paddler? And it gives you a basic itinerary based on that. And then we have a big fishing portal, which also has, because we have a lot of fishing down here. It'll tell you if you're beginning, you're an extreme angler, or, you're just starting out. So then we curate the content that way based on the interaction that visitors have with the website and the information on the website that way. So we really try to look at, again, you look in the back of the house and where people are going when they're on your website, but we're really trying to direct people to certain paths. And providing the information that they want that makes it easier for them to choose our destination over another destination that might be similar, that intrigues them enough to be like, that's pulled me in, I want to go there, versus where I always go. Or I've never been there, let me go there. Or, hey, I've come back time and time again, I'm a snowbird, but I didn't know you could have these experiences in that area. So that's kind of how we're looking at doing it digitally, is getting that information, moving people to different paths based on how they interact with us.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up question on that, Nerissa, because I think the idea of operating this two different platforms with two different messages it's brilliant, and it's a great way to understand that we have a responsibility to our destinations, and we have a responsibility to our residents and the people of our community, but we have to make it relate to the visitors that we're attracting to our community.
Mm-hmm.
How have you distinguished between those two groups, and how are you driving those visitors to the Protect Our Paradise site?
So right now, we haven't, after COVID, we've kind of taken a break with it, but a lot of it, depending on if it's a social media campaign, it'll be under the advocacy category, and then all traffic is directed to Protect Our Paradise. Or we've done a reskin at one point. So everything had the Protect Our Paradise look and feel and logo of everything. And then it's just directing them over there. And then you can go back and forth between the two websites. And some people are like, isn't that a little difficult? And I was like, we've just had so many unique situations that it makes sense for us to keep, you don't want to say the negative, but the more, if somebody's coming and they're worried about water quality, you need the information there. What is blue-green algae? What is the current conditions of the water? What are the industry resources? Or we had the dining directory and everything on that page there. And it's really about where we drove traffic to based on any of the campaigns. And I love a vanity URL. I mean, that is one of our things that we've done a lot. So in advertising, we'll use a vanity URL. So we did a big campaign with CARES funding, and it was missedmilestone.com. So that's the only URL. It goes to our website, but we can track everything that way. And then we had my Florida fishing trip when we did a big fishing campaign, and it drove everything to the fishing section of our website. So I'm a huge advocate for, vanity URLs and directing people where you want them to go, and then doing campaigns that move the traffic that way. And then from a county standpoint, whatever, however you're set up as a DMO, having a relationship with the county and the county PIO, which is Public Information Officer, is key, because then we can get the county to send that information. And it got people off of yelling at us on our Facebook page, to not yelling at the county, but like, here's where you can, write letters to your legislator, or here's what we're doing in terms of combating these issues. So having them be able to share our information that then kind of puts them in a circle, but it, gives them, this is where you want to know all the information. On our website, we have more control over, versus the county website, you don't have control over. But if you can get them to share your message, then you can kind of have the visitors going one way and the residents going somewhere else.
Love it. Love it. There's so many different components of that stand out. And I love the evergreen aspect of, let's make certain we're telling the story of our sustainability side of our destination, because it does connect so well to the financial, the environmental, and the social side of what we're doing as destination organizations. And I think the other lesson that stood out to me there is, if any of us need URLs, we should check with you first, because you may already own them. So all right, we'll remember that. Cynthia, from Fort Collins' perspective, you guys are doing a lot of work in sustainability. How are you connecting some of that to some of your content development, your content curation? You've got a lot of stories to tell, like every destination does. How are you bringing that content to life?
I think we are probably still a little bit in the collector curator, moving to executing that. And some of that, honestly, for those of you who might not be larger in size, I mean, Nerissa, I love your mighty two, right? I felt humbled that we had like 9 of us, and I thought that now we're just back to 9 after COVID impacts. But how do you always do more? Colorado focuses greatly, so we do work on that from a state level as well as our independent communities. But are you Colorado? And it's Colorado, and so it's following some leave no trace type of wisdom. And so there's that customization, as well as a bona fide relationship with our folks from Leave No Trace. They're based out of the Boulder area. And so it's really been a fantastic opportunity to do that, because that is, as a land grant community, right? We see that just weaved into our fabric. So we do education, and it's a know before you go. We did that with COVID, as so many people had it outdoors, and we saw guests from, I will say, from the South in numbers that we had not seen. We smiled at that Georgia apparently found Colorado because they found us in 2020, and it was just kind of fun because that was something that hadn't been part of our relationship, I guess. So when you have folks too who might be exploring outdoors for a first time or maybe a second time, and how do you do it, right? How do you do it safely? Like, funny, not funny, we had a mountain lion incident in Larimer County, and somebody had to fight off a mountain lion. Fortunately, it was a local, and so they had some better knowledge, but those are real. And we have to remember that if you're out on the trails, whether it be closer to town or certainly further, how do we make sure folks are safe? And how do we tell that story and educate? Colorado also uses Colorado Come to Life. And I love that, in that, how do you come here and experience part of your best life if you've never been on a horse, if you've never had a fly fishing opportunity, and there's just some great things that you can do. We do a lot of whitewater rafting. The Cache La Poudre is part of our background, and it is Colorado's only scenic and wild river. So we want to honor that, and we really work hard on that education and tying that to all of the messages that we use. So David, very important in Fort Collins and certainly throughout Colorado. We all try to be good stewards in that vein.
Love it. This stewardship is such a good word in this regard, and I see this opportunity to connect with the way that Nerissa is positioned, the Protect Our Paradise piece. You just described a completely different type of paradise, so it sounds incredible. Tony, from Milwaukee's perspective, this whole idea of content is king. How are you engaging with it to really spread this message, to reach some new audiences, to bring this cultural side of your community to life in ways that you perhaps haven't done in the past?
Well, we're not the queen of the URL codes. We are, I'll be the king of the QR codes. So we've learned one thing is QR codes have taken over a lot of things and directed people to many things. Again, I think that's getting to just think about the pandemic and getting ahead of things. So again, our CEO, Peggy Williams-Smith, wanted to get ahead. So it's multidimensional. So for example, looking out for the hospitality industry, but also looking out for our communities, but to be in the forefront of getting shots in your arms, and why we need to do that, and why we need to protect our hospitality workers, and why we need to protect our communities. So we were leading a campaign at our convention center and had shots there, and our team was on the ground there helping out and moving that forward. That's where you're engaged right with the community, and you're in the forefront. Plus, we were having webinars every week to inform our partners and our communities about things going on, and keeping in touch. And those webinars also talked about accessibility. We had a program on accessibility by having a beach where you could roll your wheelchair all the way to the beach, one of the most accessible beaches in the United States right now. We have a shareable bike system and we led the way with the Equal Rights Commission and Visit Milwaukee, and our engagement in getting accessible bikes in the shared system. And I think it's the only one in the country right now. So making connections again with the city and with our communities, and elevating and amplifying those things. Sustainability, on our website, we have the Green Business Initiative, we have the greener side of Milwaukee, and the green meeting spaces. So if you want to meet here, we have green spaces. If you want to visit here, we have a green side. And if you want to do business here, we have the Green Business Initiatives. All of that's on our website, and we're regularly amplifying those, because people come from all aspects and they're multidimensional, and they want to come and enjoy the things that they really enjoy and the things that they're passionate about. So I'm just gonna also step back and let you know, like our murals throughout the city. And I think those create a true story and are very vivid, and really capture people's imaginations and capture their attentions. But keep in mind, so we have the stories on our website. So the murals are there and they're beautiful and people look at them. but visitors are curious and they want to know the stories behind them. And the stories can be stories of success, or they can be painful moments, but they're part of the reality and the layers that exist here in Milwaukee. And we elevate not only the murals, and we elevate their stories behind them, including Mauricio Ramirez, which is he's a colorful trademark on his murals here in the city of Milwaukee. But there's always a really deep story that's behind them, and that inspire our artists as well. So again, it can go from anywhere to highlighting all of these wonderful things, action again within your own community and your city, and then looking at some of the other aspects, even like make sure that even in your B-roll content that it's thoughtful and it connects people, because people don't only see what's in the forefront of a video, they also look at the background, and that background also has to mirror your city and reflect all that's a part of your city. So every little intricate part has to come together to really relay what your city is all about.
Great advice. Cynthia, from the perspective of Fort Collins, and Tony and Nerissa, you've got a little chance to think about this. We're going to throw Cynthia right on the spot here. Cynthia, you mentioned that you're early in this process. You're guiding the way for Fort Collins in terms of what comes next for DEI initiatives. What do you see your next move in this to be? What happens next? What is the goal that, is there a short-term goal of what you want to accomplish with some of the efforts you have in place right now?
So I think one of the keys as we continue to walk further in this journey, and I like it's a marathon, certainly not a sprint, and it really needs to just continue to evolve. And we just recognize this very important jumping off in our time frame. And so this is part of our master plan. And I forget who mentioned it, but we had a pretty lively debate internally when we were working through this on, are we striving for inclusion? Or are we, there was a different word, and we ended up going towards striving, because we felt that it was that signal that this is never done, right? And so what might be great in 2022 will be different than 2025 or even in 2030. So we think just recognizing that. And the other thing is, and this is just fun news, David, you haven't even got to hear this, and Ronnie, I'll be talking to you soon, is that our budget for 2022 was approved on Tuesday, and we have dedicated funding now for DEI work. And so again, putting your money where your mouth is, right? If you mean it, you have to show it, you have to invest in it, you have to move forward. And so we're very excited for that. And we'll be planning again, more intentionally and deliberately. I don't know exactly where that will lead, but boy, I'm excited to keep moving in that space and telling the story. It will parallel with a few other things that we've put together in that strategic plan. And Fort Collins had never done a destination master plan, which I found kind of fascinating. We are a very, plan savvy city, if you will. We had outdoor plans, we had bicycle plans, we have transportation plans, we had no tourism plans. And I'm like, wow, that is a big hole. So let's do that. Let's take care of that. But we're going to pair some of our DEI work in tandem with a conversation about branding and, speaking to the fabric of who we are. We'll be doing that with what we're terming base camp. And I think others sometimes use that, especially if you're an outdoor recreation type of community or state. And so weaving those things into that story. And then the final thing is working towards a new position that we'll share with the chamber on workforce. And so all of those things are going to come into play together. So it's not a standalone issue. And we've mentioned this a couple of times that it really does have to be weaved into so many things. So we're delighted to have that opportunity. And we'll just, again, be really intentional as we move into 2022 and beyond. So excited to see where that goes.
Gee, Cynthia, you just made me exhausted. That's a big to-do list. Geez, I hope you have a good company you're working with. Nerissa, from your perspective, what comes next in Martin County?
So yeah, it's something you're always definitely striving. And I thank Ronnie for the opportunity to really kind of have us take a a closer and a harder look on what we were and weren't doing. And so again, we're a small team, so we're looking at, okay, here's the huge checklist, but what can we do? You know, the saying, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So like, what can we do, or what assets are already developed that we just need to break out and showcase more? So we're kind of working on the accessibility, because we have all the trails and stuff. So we reached out to our parks department to find out, okay, what is accessible, what isn't accessible, and doing an inventory of it that way. And then we're also part of this new, on the committee for the Martin County Black Heritage Initiative. So we're working through with them on that side of things as they start to develop their mission and their, well, they have their mission and they have everything set up, but from a visitor standpoint, what can you do as they vet through everything? We're the ones who are saying like, well, how could a visitor do this? Or how could somebody experience this? How is this not hearsay? How are we fact checking it? So we're kind of looking at those two areas first, because we have some inroads already with those. And then we're going to be breaking those out further on our website and kind of talking about it. And then we did the plan here. And again, there's only 3 of us, and we actually probably click all of the buttons, luckily, for being, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's good when you have a diverse team, if they're small. So then looking at what else we need to do and what other avenues we haven't addressed. And again, making sure it's authentic in the approach, that it's realistic. People can experience this. They can do this when they're here. And then building that out from there.
Nerissa, I think that is awesome. It sounds like you've got such a stable idea of where you want to go forward, how to get there, and you're taking the small steps that are needed to get to that part. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is no longer eat the elephant in your destination. You've got to drink the ocean. So Tony, from the perspective of Milwaukee, what happens next? What's the next short-term gain that you're trying to build within this? What do you need to get there?
It's just taking more and more work. Ethan, who was on one of the other, who's I think helping moderate one of the other panels. I remember him here with SATW. And we were on a tour with our business investment district executive director, who was giving us a tour of our Bronzeville area in Milwaukee, and talking about and just showcasing the successes, but also showcasing the challenges throughout as we were touring the locations. And one thing that stayed with me, and I think Ethan, maybe he was on here earlier too, is he said, you do have those challenges that I'm not quoting directly, but he did, I remember this distinctly. He says, you're doing the work. And that is what we have to focus on every single day, is that you're doing the work. What is the work? And I mentioned that in my 3 A's, and that is the action steps. What are the next action steps? Sure, you have a strategic plan through 2025, but how are we executing that plan? What goes into that? Who are we involving in executing that plan? It has to be greater than just the internal group. Who are we engaging as partners, or engaging as neighborhoods and communities that are coming in to help us execute our plan and our strategic plan to make everybody successful, not only our organization, which is part of the 4 pillars, as well as ensuring success. And we have to ensure success for the city. There's much to do. With the Equal Rights Commission, we are now going to get back out into communities and have listening sessions. And I think those listening sessions are going to be a valuable part. We can send out surveys left and right, but I think once you're out into the communities, like at the Black History Museum, Black History Society and Museum, they have a great event space. Let's use it for an event, a listening session, and let's sit around and have these conversations. And I think that is going to also help us direct our next path forward in this idea space. And that is really, really listening. So there's 2 parts. We are great at amplifying and marketing, but most importantly, we've got to focus on the listening.
Oh my gosh, those are incredible words to share. And I think one of the things that has truly become a part of our essence as destination organizations. And I do think this was kind of forced upon us by the pandemic and the adjustments that all of our organizations had to make. That need to never stop listening, to you're not just doing listening sessions when you are having a strategic plan or when you need to make a major shift in your organization. They never can stop now. We've got to hear what our partners need. We've got to hear what our stakeholders need. We have to really hear what our community needs. If we don't stop listening and we always have that active audience engagement piece, then they won't stop listening to us. And I think that's a core piece of this advocacy piece. And I think we can utilize these opportunities for becoming more resilient, for being more active with our DEI initiatives, all of those different components as a reason to continually stay engaged with that level of listening. Tony, you mentioned there's work to be done. And I'm going to come full circle with the way we started. And David was kind enough to talk a little bit about the workforce initiatives that he's helping Ronnie put in place. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help with capacity around your community. Are you engaging in workforce development initiatives within your community? Is it something that you're seeing a need for? That's kind of a dumb way to ask the question, because I know everyone has intense levels of workforce needs right now. So what are some of the things you're doing in Visit Milwaukee to help with this?
We're all in great need. I see restaurants and hotels that are in desperate need for staffing. So I think what's important from our aspect is continue to be the educators in the community as far as what hospitality is all about. What are the potentials of committing yourself to a career in hospitality, and how important it is? As people look at it from maybe applying for a job, they might be a little bit reluctant because they know what hospitality people have had to go through lately. And it hasn't been the best. So we've got to turn that around. And I think as a DMO, we're a CVB, we're responsible for also amplifying that these are lasting jobs. These are jobs that are important. And I think increasing the amplification of the economic impact to the communities, and that right here in our city, 55,000 jobs are created because of the hospitality business, and how valuable and important that is. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I think the pipeline goes even further. We've got to educate folks from a young age and excite them about hospitality, and excite them about the industry and how we move forward. And what is tourism? And what is hospitality? So I think even defining those terms within our communities and getting out there into those communities and to those community events and sharing that information. If it's a job fair, like here in this city, the LGBTQ Community Center here in Milwaukee is having a job fair. And how do we engage with our LGBTQ community members and give them, inspire them to join this team. But at the same time, I think we just have to make people whole. We have to also communicate in the community that we have to be nice to everyone. We have to be patient, and we need to respect our hospitality workers, because they're a valuable asset in our community and to the success of our community. So I think if we all the way around, it's something we could focus on each time. But I'm really wanting to get out into communities and neighborhoods who may not have a clear understanding about what we're all about and the potential there is, and to create those pipelines throughout the city and throughout the community.
Tony, I think there's a great example out there. If you haven't followed it, Visit Anaheim, this is pre-pandemic, but Visit Anaheim was trying to get ahead of this in a very similar capacity. They actually took the opportunity to basically wrap a bus, and the bus was their vehicle, no pun intended, to reach into the different aspects of the community, take the message out there that it wasn't a public sector bus. It was truly a bus meant to educate. They would bring people on board. They would talk about the career opportunities. It just became this gift into helping try to drive interest into what's a very dynamic, a very fulfilling career option for people to consider, and all the different aspects of that we touch in these type of jobs. So take a look at that if you ever have a chance to visit. Anaheim's done some really cool things with that.
That would be ideal, because I failed to mention we're looking at a mobile kiosk here, and that is to get out there and provide visitor information, but also we could provide other sources of information about job opportunities and those connections. And not only do we want to do things around the city and our neighborhoods, we want to take it around the state to help educate and give people a different narrative about what Milwaukee's all about. And I think that's important too. We've been down to Chicago to the intermodal train station down there, and setting up there and providing that, not only just promotion, but I think education is a valuable tool to making all of this whole and better for all of us in this industry.
That's great. Nerissa, you mentioned before we jumped into the panelist room here that you've been doing some really cool things around this workforce issue. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So it was one of the chambers that brought us to us. So although Martin County is small, we have 5 chambers of commerce, which can be, interesting because they're membership based, whereas we're not. And so they're doing a job for a job fair coming up. And so we were the connectivity, like, okay, we know the hospitality employees, there's a shortage. We've heard about it. What can we do? So then we were able to bring in Florida and Restaurant and Lodging Association as the main arm. And that's what they do. They do lobbying. They kind of connect all the hotels. They have the employers. The chambers also have employers. And then we also pulled in Stewart Main Street, which is where a lot of the businesses are, to host it there. So we were able to connect the dots, or kind of be the connectivity of like, okay, why don't we look at this partner and this partner and this partner? And now they've all come together to do a job fair, which will be really good, and we're supporting and sending out. And then one thing, it's not here in Martin County, but that FRLA did, which again, Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, is they reached out to different organizations. So they're working with a company that does workforce release for people who have just gotten out of jail and who are looking for jobs. They're working with several organizations that work with individuals with disabilities, but they want good jobs. They want to work. They're hardworking. And then they're also working with women who have dealt with domestic violence issues. So they kind of went outside of the norm and are partnering. And it's a different spin on a job fair, because it's the executive directors of all of these nonprofit organizations. And so then the employer, the potential employer, so it's the restaurant or the hotel, is meeting with an executive director of, Place of Hope, or a different organization. And they're saying, this is what we need. And they're saying, well, yeah, we have individuals that we work and serve with that we think would match up. So the executive directors are kind of doing the match force, or the matching that way. And then they're going to schedule additional interviews. And then the company that deals with workforce release, we have all these individuals that have just gotten out of prison, are looking for jobs. They're looking for this type of stuff. So it's a kind of an alternative way of bringing in different populations into the hospitality industry. And then we also have several. I think one thing that we get stuck with sometimes as individuals is it's always about your career path as you go to college, and then you're going to determine what you want to do. Well, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of people, college isn't for everyone, and it doesn't need to be for everyone. So we have some organizations that work with the students here. We have a culinary program. There's a Project Lift that deals with bringing children in and teaching them mechanical type, electrician, like whatever that component is. Obviously it's not me, but they are actually pulling in some of the students and getting them job ready, and then moving them up the pipe that way. So we kind of connected all of those things together.
That's awesome. And so I love the comprehensive approach that you're taking with this. It just makes so much sense to not approach it from okay, we need a program that addresses this. It is, we need multiple programs that address it from different ways, different perspectives. Love it. Cynthia, you're doing some things in the talent and workforce field, similar but very different. You want to talk a little bit about it?
One of the things that we did as we got to start opening a little more, we definitely had it depended upon the hotel, whether it was 3 weeks or almost 2 months of being closed in our part of the country, was that, our largest hotel, 330 rooms, probably 150 employees, and they went from 150 employees to 3. And to restaff that is really hard. It startled some of their longtime folks. We have people who, I think throughout any of us working here, who have chosen to leave the industry. So we do have to go back to the pipeline and how might we work on that. So Larimer County was gracious, and they had a program available where we got to partner with them and do a virtual job fair. And so it was ran for 2 weeks. Employers could register, interested parties could register, and then they could figure out when to get together. But that way you could see, just a wide variety of positions, and for folks who might be transitioning from another industry too, something that was impacted, and so they were interested in exploring with tourism. And so we were grateful for that opportunity, and I think that will continue to open some different doors for us as we move forward. The other thing is that we work with our Chamber of Commerce. I think most of us do, but it has evolved to the point where we are expecting to fund a shared position with our chamber, specifically related to workforce. What do our talent recruiters need from employers all over town, whether they be small, big, even the university, because the university finds themselves sometimes reaching out to a group, and we get somebody hired and then they come and there is truly an issue with fit, right? And so how long will they be here? What's that comfort level? Because on campus, they may feel very comfortable, but they might not be as comfortable when they are out in the community, just because, of look or lifestyle or whatever that may be. So being really cognizant of that, and knowing that, much like we talked about itineraries, we all have to really step up and make sure that we are finding avenues forward for those folks to be comfortable. But tuning in a bit on our employers, what they need, and then the other side of what we all do is how do we persuade them to bring more of their business here, right? If they are a large enough company where they are doing stuff all over, once in a while I'll catch them and they're like, oh, we're meeting in Denver. And I'm like, what did you say, right? So we're just teasing them and reminding them, come and meet in your own backyard. How can we really provide you with an experience that is unique to our community, highlight that, help them retain their talent and bring in new talent. So that's some of what we're up to.
Oh, wow. 3 incredible panelists, a multitude of actions, to use Tony's word, a multitude of actions. I am so impressed with the 3 of you. Thank you for sharing your efforts, your knowledge, your experience here. I want to real quickly throw out a few things that stood out to me. I love the 3 A's. In fact, I'm going to steal that, Tony. I'm letting you know that in advance. I hope there's no copyright of that, but it is authenticity, accountability, and action. I think we all need to live by those 3 rules. I love the idea of unique unites. I'm going to definitely check that out. I'm going to definitely check out Protect Our Paradise. I am going to try to do searches to see what vanity URLs Nerissa actually owns. I'm totally curious now. It is definitely reached into the curiosity side of me. Cynthia, I am so impressed with the work that you're doing. Nerissa, so impressed with the work that you're doing. And Tony, your work is, and what you're doing with the ideas idea is just amazing. Thank you all so much. Ronnie, back to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees. That is it for this session. The next session that's coming up is going to be at 4 Eastern. It's a 2-parter. The first hour is going to be around the tour industry overall. So we have representatives from associations, NTA, CITA, Student Youth Tourism Association, and Joan Cadell from ITMI. Our second hour is going to be really digging into, once again, how are we working with these tour operators? What are these tour operators doing around workforce and building up the entrepreneurship side of things? How are we balancing the fact that there are individuals who want to have a stable job within a company, and there are others who want to be starting their own businesses? So those are some of the things that are going to be addressed there. Our last session at 6 today, we've had a lot of great folks talking, and every last session today, tomorrow, and Friday will be more of a dialogue for folks to share. So, and they're all around the 3 pillars of Travel Unity's DEI standards. So the 6 p.m. Eastern session today is around community impact. So you now have a little more than 30 minutes until the next session. Hope to see you there, and thanks again to everybody.